Who really knows who is walking the streets at night? The hallway outside your door, the bus stop, the parking lot under your window, all look harmless in the daytime, but change completely when the sun goes down. Sometimes danger does not come from dark places, but from a simple knock, a friendly voice asking for help, or a stranger who seems a little too interested in your routine. People open doors, answer late calls, or stop to talk, thinking it will take only a minute. The stories you are about to hear are about those moments, about night visitors who are not always what they seem, and about how one short encounter can change everything. Are you sure you would recognize a dangerous stranger before it is too late? About 5 years ago, I was living in the heart of a large American city. I had always been a night owl, so I would often get restless late at night, while my roommate, who was very much not a night person, was long asleep. To pass the time, I would go on long walks and just think. I did this for 4 years, alone, late at night, on city streets, and never once felt afraid. I used to joke with my roommate that even the local street characters were polite. But all of that changed in the span of a few minutes on one particular evening. It was a Tuesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. I was walking past a park that gets regular police patrols, pretty far from my apartment. The night was quiet even by weeknight standards. Almost no cars. No other pedestrians. The park was empty as usual. I turned onto a short side street to loop back toward home, and that is when I first saw him. At the far end of the street, on my side of the sidewalk, there was the figure of a man. He was dancing. It was a strange kind of dance, something like a waltz, but after every few steps, he would lurch forward. You could say he was dancing his way toward me. I assumed he was probably disoriented and moved closer to the curb to give him more room. As he got closer, I could see that his movements were actually very smooth and deliberate. He was tall and thin, wearing an old-fashioned suit. He kept dancing closer until I could make out his face. His eyes were wide open and wild. His head was tilted slightly back, face turned toward the sky, and his mouth was stretched into a painfully wide, cartoonish grin. Looking at those eyes and that smile, I decided to cross to the other side of the street before he got any closer. I glanced away for just a second to cross the empty road. When I reached the other sidewalk and looked back, I stopped completely. He had stopped dancing. He was standing with one foot on the road, directly across from me, still looking at the sky, still smiling. I was filled with complete and absolute confusion. I started walking again, keeping my eyes on him. He did not move. When there was about half a block between us, I looked down for a second to watch my step. When I looked back to where he had been standing, he was gone. For a brief moment, I felt relief until I spotted him. He had crossed the street. Now he was standing in a slight crouch. Because of the distance and the shadows, I could not be completely sure, but I was certain he was looking at me. I had looked away for no more than 10 seconds, and he had already moved, fast. I was so stunned that I just stood there staring at him, and then he started moving again. Enormous, exaggerated, tiptoe steps, like a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I wish I could say that at this point I ran, or reached for something, or grabbed my phone, or did anything at all, but I did not. I just stood there completely frozen while the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about 1 or 2 meters away. Same smile, eyes toward the sky. When I finally found my voice, The first thing that came out was not what I intended. I had wanted to sound sharp and demanding. Instead, what came out was a weak, trembling, "What are you doing?" You do not need to smell fear to sense it. You can hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and it scared me even more. But he did not react at all. He just stood there smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and walked away, dancing just like before. Just like that, for no reason at all. Not wanting to turn my back on him, I watched until he was almost out of sight. And then I noticed something. He was not getting farther away anymore, and he was not dancing anymore. I watched in horror as the distant figure got larger and larger. He was coming back, this time at a run. I ran too. I ran until I made it off the side street and onto a busier road with the occasional car passing by. When I looked back, there was nobody there. I checked over my shoulder the whole way home, half expecting to see that wide grin somewhere behind me. But he was gone. I lived in that city for another 6 months after that night. I never went on a late night walk again. There was something about his face that I could not shake. He did not look disoriented. He did not look like he was on anything. He looked completely and utterly unhinged. And that, more than anything else, is what truly terrified me. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with the idea of riding my bike at night. It just seemed unbelievably cool. I was 13 when my mom finally said yes. She told me to wear a helmet, take my phone, bring a flashlight, and she set clear limits on how far I was allowed to go. She gave me about 6 kilometers of space. To me, it felt like total freedom. As soon as the sun went down, I was already on my bike. I loved it instantly. No people walking their dogs, no kids running around. The temperature was perfect. I was having such a good time that I did not notice how I started ignoring my mom's boundaries. I was riding along pedestrian paths through a green belt between 2 neighborhoods. There was this long downhill stretch, maybe 200 meters, pretty steep. I flew down that hill and shot right past the edge of the allowed area. My mom had not picked that boundary at random. Everything inside the line was close to houses and people. Outside the line, especially where that path led, there was nothing. I kept riding for about 10 minutes, and the lights from the houses behind me almost disappeared. About 15 minutes into the ride on a dirt trail, I heard singing. The sound was coming from maybe 10 or 12 meters ahead of me. I stopped pedaling and listened. It was a woman's voice. She was humming the melody of Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles. Not the words, just the tune. Her voice sounded wrong. You know how a voice sounds when there is something in a person's throat, rough and scratchy. That is exactly how it sounded. I started rolling forward slowly, trying to see her. I got close enough to make out the outline of hair bouncing up and down like she was thrashing her head to the rhythm. I decided to take out my flashlight. Part of me thought maybe this person needed help. Another part of me thought maybe she was unstable and the light might scare her away. I pulled the flashlight out of my pocket, aimed it at her, and turned it on. The second the light hit her, she went completely still. She was standing with her back to me. Her hair looked awful, matted into clumps. Some patches looked like chunks had been ripped out entirely. She was wearing a huge bright red hoodie that was way too big for her. I could barely move. I was so scared. It felt like she was frozen too. I scraped together what little courage I had and said, "Excuse me," in that awkward voice you use when you realize you have just walked into the wrong room. She did not answer. I turned the flashlight off and shoved it back into my pocket. The moment I started to turn my bike around, she screamed. It was a horrible, piercing, high-pitched scream. I almost lost control of everything as I scrambled back onto the bike in a panic. I could hear her voice getting closer. I pedaled as hard as I possibly could. I did not look back. I did not stop pedaling. Her screaming got quieter and quieter until it finally disappeared into the sound of the wind. I have told this story to only a few people, and most of them laugh or make jokes, but I swear this really happened. I have always loved garage sales. In the summer, if I have a free day, I can drive around for hours, just following signs and passing time. About 2 years ago, I was doing exactly that. I kept following signs farther and farther into the countryside, enjoying the scenery and the feeling of getting a little lost on back roads. Sometimes that is how you find the best sales. I noticed a sign by the road near a large stone with something carved into it, something that looked religious, like a church sign. I do not remember exactly what it said, maybe something like House of God or something similar. I figured it might be interesting if it was connected to a church, so I turned in. The road was long and narrow, covered in gravel. After a while, the trees opened up to a clearing with a beautiful white house. There were long tables set up with clothes, toys, and other random things, but nothing that really caught my attention. There were about 30 people there, all wearing identical gray outfits. That already felt strange. The only person who looked like a normal visitor was an older man. His truck was parked nearby. Basically, it was just me and him, and everyone else dressed the same. A woman at the table where people paid for items started talking to me just as I was about to leave. I walked over and chatted with her for a bit. That is when I noticed about 10 small gray buildings behind the house, and people were going in and out of them. After a short conversation, she saw me looking in that direction. She said, "Yes, we all live here. It is wonderful. Would you like to come inside and learn more?" There was something strange in her eyes. I tried to come up with an excuse, but she nodded to 3 men who had been working at the tables, and they walked over and stood around me. She said, "Really, come in. We share peace and faith. You will like it." She took my hand and started pulling me toward the house, and the men followed. I tried to protest, but it felt weak and pointless. At that moment, the older man who had been looking through books noticed what was happening and came over. He looked at the woman and said, "Excuse me, Mom. We need to go now. I do not think she is interested." The woman looked surprised, but she let go of my hand, and the men stepped back. The man was thin, and I am not very tall myself, but he grabbed my hand firmly and quickly led me to my car. As I thanked him and called out something polite to the people behind us, he quietly said, "You need to leave right now." My hands were shaking. All the people in gray had turned and were silently watching us. I struggled to get my key into the lock. He stood by my open window while I tried to start the car and turn it around on the narrow gravel road. I tried to make a 3-point turn, but the car slipped into a shallow ditch, and I started to panic. He calmly said, "Relax, turn on the 4-wheel drive." I whispered that I did not know how. I had only owned that car for a couple of months, and I had never driven one like it before. He calmly explained what to do and stayed there, guiding me, until I managed to get out and drive away as fast as I could. I shouted thank you to him. He nodded and got into his truck. I told my family and friends about it later, but they just laughed and said there are no groups like that around here. It was probably just a church sale at someone's house. I went back to that area a few times, but I never saw that stone sign again. To be honest, that day I had driven so far into the countryside that I had no idea where I really was. I only had a rough sense of direction to get back to the main road. I still believe I accidentally found some kind of hidden group, and honestly, I'm just grateful that man helped me get out of there.